You can judge me. I mean, most people do. And maybe they're right. What I did, it was wrong. There's no sugarcoating it. I crossed a line, the kind of line you don't just step over. You leap, knowing full well there's no going back. But the thing is, behind every mistake, every betrayal, every stolen moment, there's a story. And mine didn't begin in some steamy hotel room or under flickering streetlights. It started in my kitchen, with a broken sink, and a man I wasn't supposed to notice. His name was Liam. And from the very moment he stepped into my world, he didn't just walk through the door. He moved something in me that had been still for far too long. I wasn't looking for love. Not from him. Not from anyone. I had a husband. 2 beautiful kids. A home. A calendar full of dentist appointments and school pickups. A marriage that looked good enough from the outside. It was quiet. Predictable. Comfortable in the way an old sweater is. A little worn, stretched out, maybe even itchy. But it still fits. And you keep wearing it, because it's easier than finding something new. But comfort. It has a price. And somewhere between the laundry piles and the half-eaten dinners, I stopped feeling anything at all. Then came Liam. You know that moment when you meet someone and everything just tilts? Like the air shifts and suddenly you're aware of your own breathing? That's what it was like. 1 second, he was just a friend of my sister's, younger, unexpected, safe. The next, he was the first person in years who actually saw me. Not as a mom, not as Michael's wife, but as me. You ever sit across from someone and feel like they can read the ache behind your smile? Like they know exactly what you're not saying, and they're daring you to finally say it? That was Liam. And before I could even realize what was happening, I found myself looking for reasons to see him again. To talk. To laugh. To feel something that wasn't numb. And then, one night, we were alone. Just the 2 of us. And in that silence, everything changed. I know what you're thinking. How could she? Why would she risk it all? But the truth is, when you've spent years fading in your own life, the first spark of color, of heat, doesn't feel like danger. It feels like rescue. So before you write me off, before you decide what kind of woman I am, let me tell you the whole story. Not just the messy ending, but the ache that came before it. The silence. The longing. The moment I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror and started searching for her again in the wrong arms. I never planned to fall. But love, or whatever this was, it doesn't always knock. Sometimes, it just walks right in, uninvited. And once it's there, you either run, or you surrender. So, if you're still here, if you really want to know how it happened, what we did, what I lost, and what I found in the wreckage, then listen closely. Because this isn't just a story about cheating. It's a story about being seen. And what happens when you finally see yourself. It was just after 7:30. The kitchen smelled like garlic and reheated leftovers. One of the kids had spilled juice on the counter hours ago, and I hadn't even noticed until I leaned against the sticky surface. The faucet was leaking again, this slow, rhythmic drip that had been driving me mad for days. Drip. 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 And that night, I was too tired to care. Michael was late, again. Another late shift, another meeting that ran long. I didn't even ask anymore. I just assumed. He always had a reason, and honestly, it was easier not to know. The kids were in their rooms, half asleep, cartoons humming softly from down the hall. And me? I was standing there, barefoot on the cold tile, staring at that leaky faucet like it was the final straw holding my sanity together. That's when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps on the back door. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened it, half expecting one of the neighbors. But instead, there he was. Liam, my best friend Emily's younger brother. 10 years younger, to be exact. I hadn't seen him in, God, maybe 2 years? He was only in town for a little while, visiting his sister while taking time off from his job at an auto shop upstate. And somehow, standing there in my doorway, he looked both exactly the same and completely different. "Hey," he said, flashing that familiar, boyish grin. Said your sink's acting up?" I blinked. I must have looked like I didn't understand English for a second. He laughed a little, held up a small red toolbox. I figured I'd come save the day. I should have said no. I should have told him I was fine, that I had it handled. But the truth was, I was exhausted. Not just kitchen sink exhausted, life exhausted. So I stepped aside and let him in. He knelt by the cabinet, head halfway under the sink, muttering something about water pressure and old pipes. And I just stood there, watching him. Watching the way his hands moved, confident, assured. The way he filled the room with this calm, steady energy. It wasn't flirty. Not at first. It was just kind. Different. He asked how I'd been, and I gave the usual answer. "Oh, busy. Kids. Life." But then he looked up at me, brows furrowed. "No, I mean really. How are you, Isabel?" You have to understand, it had been years since anyone asked me that in a way that felt like they actually wanted to hear the answer. Not out of politeness. Not as a throwaway. But real curiosity. And that stopped me. I laughed it off. Said something about getting old, being tired all the time. He just nodded, wiped his hands on a rag. Then, he glanced at my hands. "You used to paint your nails," he said softly, noticing the chipped polish, the way the color had grown out and flaked away. I looked down at my fingers. I hadn't even realized. "Still your favorite red?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because he already knew. He saw the bags under my eyes. The way my sweater hung loose like I hadn't bothered with a mirror in days. The way I wrapped my arms around myself, like I was trying to hold all the pieces together. And in that tiny kitchen, with the faucet finally fixed and a silence settling between us, he handed me the wrench and said, "Go ahead. Tighten it." I knelt down next to him, fingers brushing his as I reached for the tool. Our hands touched just for a moment. But it was enough. Enough to make me look at him. And when I did, he was already looking at me. Not like a little brother's friend. Not like a handyman doing a favor. But like a man seeing a woman. And my breath caught. That look lasted maybe 3 seconds. But it felt like a whole conversation. I stood quickly, muttered something about tea, about not wanting to keep him late. He stood too. Slowly and smiled again, but this time, there was something else behind it. Something unspoken. "Call me if it leaks again," he said. "I'll come by." Then he left. And I just stood there. Still barefoot. Still tired. But something in me had shifted. I didn't know what it meant yet. Didn't fully understand the ripple that had just started. But I felt it, like the first tiny crack in a dam. One small touch. One long glance. One moment I should have brushed off. But couldn't. That night, as I lay next to Michael, his back turned, soft snoring filling the room, I kept seeing Liam's face. The warmth in his eyes. The quiet way he noticed me. Noticed everything I'd forgotten to see in myself. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. And that was the beginning. After that night, Liam started showing up more. Not in a pushy, obvious way, but in those quiet, casual ways that make it easy to lie to yourself. He came by the next week to check on the faucet. Just in case. Then it was the porch light, the garage hinge, the busted garden hose, always with that same easy smile, toolbox in hand, like he was just doing a neighborly favor. But we both knew it was more than that. We started having coffee after he'd finish whatever he was fixing. Me with my chipped mug that said "World's Okayest Mom," him, sipping slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't like most people who talk at you. He listened. And it wasn't the kind of listening where someone's just waiting for their turn to speak. No. He leaned in, tilted his head slightly, brows furrowed like he needed to understand. He asked about my art, something I hadn't touched in years. Not since the kids were little. Didn't you used to paint? He asked one afternoon, sitting on the back steps while the sun dipped low behind the fence. I blinked. I had almost forgotten that version of me. The one who stayed up late smudging charcoal across canvas. The one who saw colors in everything, even pain. I shrugged, said something about life getting in the way. And he just said, you should start again. That was it. Simple. Gentle. But the way he said it made it sound like a promise. Like there was still time to find her, the girl I'd left behind somewhere in the blur of diapers and deadlines and date nights that turned into silence. One afternoon, he was in the garage rewiring the motion light. The kids were at a friend's, Michael was on another business trip, and the house was quiet in that eerie, too-perfect way. I brought him a glass of iced tea, and as he stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead, he pulled out his phone. You ever heard this one? He asked, hitting play. And there it was, that song. The one I used to loop back in college. The one I painted to on rainy Sundays with bare feet and no makeup and hope still thick in my chest. My mouth fell open. How do you know the song? I asked. He just grinned, took a sip of tea. Emily had it on a mixtape when I was a kid. You played it nonstop. It stuck. I laughed. Not one of those polite, practice chuckles I gave at PTA meetings or dinner parties. No. A real laugh. Full-bodied. Surprised. It caught me off guard, how foreign it felt in my own mouth. How light I felt for just a second. And Liam, he watched me. That way he always did. Noticing. Not just noticing. Seeing. Over the next couple of weeks, I found myself noticing back. The way he ran a hand through his hair when he was thinking. The tiny scar above his eyebrow from a childhood bike crash. The warmth of his voice, steady, low, the kind of sound that wrapped around you like a blanket on a cold morning. And the way he looked at me like I wasn't tired, wasn't invisible, wasn't lost, like I mattered. And with every coffee, every laugh, every soft touch as we passed mugs or stood too close in the doorway, something inside me began to shift. One night, I was folding laundry in the living room. Michael was upstairs, pacing on the phone with a client, door shut. His voice low, intense, but not for me. And without even thinking about it, I found myself glancing out the window, waiting for him, for Liam. And when I caught myself, hands frozen in the middle of folding one of Michael's button-downs, my stomach dropped. I was a wife, a mother. What the hell was I doing standing there like a teenager, wondering if he'd swing by just to say hello? I told myself it was innocent. We were friends. He was helping around the house. That's all. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't just the conversations or the coffee or the tools on the counter. It was the feeling. That flutter in my chest when I heard his truck pull up. That stupid rush of adrenaline when his name popped up on my phone. The way I'd catch myself humming that song he played long after he was gone. It was emotional. It was real. And it was dangerous. I started wearing mascara again. Just a little. Nothing noticeable. I dug my old sketchbook out from the back of the closet. Flipped through the yellowing pages, fingers tracing the faded charcoal lines like they belonged to someone else. And all the while, I kept telling myself this wasn't what it felt like. That I wasn't falling. That nothing had happened. But the truth? It was happening. Slowly, quietly, like water wearing down stone. The day I knew I was in trouble was a Wednesday. Liam had come by to fix a loose floorboard in the hallway. The kids were at school. Michael was at the office. It was nothing out of the ordinary. But as I stood there, coffee in hand, barefoot on the tile, watching him work, he looked up at me and smiled. And in that single moment, it was as if the air in the room shifted. Thicker. Heavier. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. And so was I. I hadn't crossed a line yet. Not technically. But emotionally? I was already standing on the edge, toes curled over the ledge. And part of me was terrified. But another part. the part one hadn't let speak in years, was wide awake. It was a Thursday night. Late October. The kind of night where the rain doesn't just fall, it presses against the windows. Heavy. Insistent. Like the sky itself is trying to say something. The kids were with my mother, a last-minute sleepover, because school was off the next day and Michael was out of town on a conference. Again. The power flickered once. Twice. Then everything went dark. No hum of the refrigerator. No glow from the hallway light. Just the sound of the storm. And the silence it left behind. I lit candles. Placed one on the coffee table. Another in the kitchen. And then just stood there. The house felt different without electricity. Warmer. Quieter. Like it had secrets. And then a knock on the door. 3 soft raps. I opened it, and there he was. Liam. Damp hoodie. A flashlight in one hand, toolbox in the other. He smiled. Power's out on the whole block. Thought I'd check in, make sure you weren't freaking out alone in the dark. I almost laughed. I'm fine, I said. Just pretending to be brave. He held up a bag. Brought snacks. And wine. Thought maybe you could use the company. We sat on the couch, cross-legged like teenagers at a sleepover. The candles flickered, casting soft shadows across the walls. Outside, the rain danced on the roof like a lullaby for the broken. We sipped wine from mismatched mugs. Talked about stupid things at first, horror movies we hated, childhood fears, the time his sister tricked him into eating soap. Then, it shifted. He asked about Michael. And I froze. He didn't pry. Didn't push. Just said, quietly, you don't talk about him much. I looked down into my mug. Then I said it. I don't know when we stopped seeing each other. Maybe we just got tired. Or numb. Or maybe we both just started fading in different directions. There was a pause. Not the awkward kind, the honest kind. The kind that sits between two people when something raw has just been said. And then he spoke. I get it, he said. You know, people always say I'm good with my hands, but sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to fix something in me. Like I never quite fit where I'm supposed to. I looked up at him then. And there it was. That same ache. Not in words, in the space between them. In the tired look in his eyes. In the way he was holding everything together with duct tape and hope. We weren't so different, after all. The rain picked up. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. The candle between us hissed as wax dripped down its side. And in that small cocoon of golden light and quiet honesty, he reached for my hand. Not like a move. Not like a man trying to seduce a woman. It was soft. Reverent. Like he was asking for permission to hold something breakable. Our fingers intertwined. And I felt it, the heat rushing up my neck, down my spine. That guilty flutter of a woman who hasn't been touched with intention in years. I looked at him. Really looked. His face was inches from mine. His eyes, deep and searching. His breath, warm and steady. His hand, gently brushing mine like it had always belonged there. And then he said it. Softly, like a secret. You don't have to pretend anymore, Isabel. It hit me like a wave. Because I had been pretending. For so long. Pretending to be content. Pretending to be strong. Pretending I didn't need to be seen, or held, or chosen. And something cracked. Something deep. Like a dam giving way after holding back too much for too long. He reached up and touched my cheek. Just barely. But it felt like a lightning strike. I closed my eyes. Leaned in just a little. Felt the warmth of his skin, the breath between us, the pull of gravity I no longer had the strength to resist. And then I stopped. Pulled back. Breathless. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I stood, too quickly. Took a shaky step back. You need to go, I whispered. I couldn't look at him, because if I did, I wouldn't say it again. He didn't argue. Didn't get angry. Just nodded and stood. And as he walked toward the door, I felt this ache like something precious was being ripped away before it had even fully arrived. He paused at the doorway, turned back just once. His eyes met mine in the dim light, and without saying another word, he left. I stood there for a long time, listening to the storm, to my own heartbeat, to the silence he left behind. And I knew that something had changed, not just in the room, but in me. I had crossed a line not with my body, but with my heart. And once you feel that kind of pull, you can't pretend it didn't happen. It didn't happen the next day, or even the day after that. I avoided him, told myself I needed space, that it was a momentary lapse, that I'd come to my senses. But the thing is, once you've almost touched a fire, you don't forget the heat. It was maybe 2 weeks later. I'd gone to drop something off at his sister's, an old box of books she'd lent me when the kids were little. She wasn't home, but he was. Liam opened the door with that same quiet smile. The kind that didn't demand anything, but somehow still undressed the thoughts you tried to hide. I meant to hand the box over and leave. I swear I did. But then he asked if I wanted to come in. Just for a second. Just to say hi. And I said yes. The house was quiet. Dim sunlight poured through the kitchen blinds. Something smelled like cinnamon. He offered me coffee. I said I couldn't stay. But I didn't leave. We stood in the back hallway, the one near the laundry room. And maybe it was the way he looked at me, or the way I couldn't stop feeling him when he was near. But I cracked, just snapped inside, and I kissed him. Hard. No planning. No permission. Just months of loneliness exploding all at once. He froze for half a second, stunned, then kissed me back. His hands in my hair, mine on his chest. That hallway felt like a world outside of time. Like a place where consequences didn't live. We didn't sleep together that day. But the line had been crossed. And once it was, there was no turning back. The first time we did, it was raining again. Everything in my life seems to happen when it rains. The kids were at school. Michael had flown to Chicago for work. I told myself I wasn't going to see Liam. I told myself 1,000 things. But my feet, they walked anyway. He picked me up 2 blocks away. Didn't want the neighbors to notice his car. We drove without talking much. Ended up at a small Airbnb he'd borrowed from a friend. Said it was just for the afternoon. Said we had time. But it wasn't about time. It was about escape. And when it finally happened, it wasn't wild or reckless like I'd imagined. It was quiet, gentle, like 2 people who knew they were making a mistake, but needed to make it anyway. Afterward, I laid there, tangled in sheets that didn't belong to me, and stared at the ceiling. My wedding ring pressed cold against my chest where my hand had rested. And I remember thinking, this can't be who I am. This isn't me. But then he touched my hand and looked at me like I was everything, and the guilt for a second got drowned out by the feeling of being wanted. Not out of obligation, but choice. It didn't end there. The affair became a rhythm, a heartbeat in a life that had gone numb. Afternoons in the backseat of his truck, behind the old train station. Late-night texts, "Are you okay?" turning into, "I miss you." A key hidden in a planter. A motel room off the highway that we kept returning to. And every time, it was like opening a wound I didn't know I had. A wound that bled both relief and regret. There were moments I felt like I was floating. Like the old version of me, the one who used to paint, laugh, feel alive, was coming back to life. Liam made me feel like Isabel again. Not mom, not wife, just me. But then I'd go home and see my children's drawings on the fridge, Michael's favorite mug in the sink. And I'd want to scream, because I had built this life, and now I was poisoning it. There's this moment that plays in my mind more than any other. We were lying in the back of his car, the windows fogged, the smell of his cologne and winter air in the fabric of everything, and I looked down at my hand, my wedding ring catching a beam of light as it shifted, and something in me ached. Because I loved my family. I did. But I needed him. And those 2 truths couldn't live in the same house. The guilt, it wasn't loud. It was slow, creeping, like water slipping through cracks. Sometimes, in the middle of laughter, it would grab me by the throat. Sometimes I'd cry in the shower, just so no one could hear. And sometimes, I'd stare at Liam and think, what if this is the real love story? What if I've been living someone else's life? But then I'd come home and see Michael helping our daughter with her math homework. Or hear my son whisper, I love you, half asleep after a nightmare. And I'd feel it again. That pull. That tearing. Like I was made of two people and neither one knew how to live without hurting the other. Every time we were together, it felt right. And every time we weren't, the guilt clawed at me, like it wanted to rip me apart from the inside out. But I kept going, because in Liam's arms, I found the one thing I hadn't felt in years. Alive. It started slowly. Michael was always distracted. Work, meetings, emails that went long into the night. So when he became present, I didn't think much of it. At first, he started asking simple questions. What time did I get home? Who was I texting? He even offered to take the kids more often so I could have some time to myself. Which was almost sweet. Except, I could feel it. The way his eyes lingered. The pause in his voice. He wasn't just being thoughtful. He was watching. And then, there was Carly. My oldest friend. The one who sees through my silences. We were at brunch one morning, just the two of us. She looked at me, squinting like she was solving a puzzle. You've been glowing lately, she said. And I laughed, brushing it off with a sip of coffee. But she wasn't done. She leaned in, smirking. Who is he? My heart nearly stopped. I told her she was imagining things. But she didn't press. She just nodded, took a bite of her croissant, and smiled with a quiet sadness. Because she knew. And she knew I wasn't ready to admit it. And then Liam. He changed too. He wanted more. It wasn't enough to steal afternoons anymore. He wanted mornings, dinners. He wanted weekends. He started bringing it up, gently at first. You don't have to keep living like this, he said once, while brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. You could be happy. Really happy. And I told him the truth. This was supposed to be a moment. Not a new life. He didn't understand. Or maybe he did, and just didn't want to. I thought I could manage it. 2 lives. 1 heart. But it never works like that. It happened on a Thursday. I'd been careless, rushing, distracted. Michael came home early and found a receipt on the kitchen counter. It was folded inside a grocery list I'd written. Room 104. 1 night stay. A motel we never stayed at together. When I came downstairs, he was standing there holding it like it was a burning piece of paper. He didn't say a word. Just held it up. Looked at me with that face. That emptiness. And I lied. I lied without blinking. Said it was Carly's. Said I was holding it for her. And Michael, God help him, just nodded. Like he wanted to believe me. Like part of him needed to believe me more than he needed the truth. But after that, everything changed. He didn't touch me for days. Didn't ask where I was going, but his silence screamed every time I grabbed my purse. The kids didn't notice. But I did. The small ways he stopped looking me in the eye. The way he started sleeping on his side, his back always to me. Liam was waiting for me the next day. I told him we needed to be careful. He didn't like that. You can't keep hiding forever, Isabel. I looked at him, really looked at him. And, for the first time, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Anger. Not violent. Just betrayed. Like he thought I'd promised him something I didn't even know I was offering. He wanted me to leave. Not just the motel. Not just for the night. He wanted me to leave my marriage. My children. My home. And I panicked. Because I never saw this as a future. Only a refuge. A place to rest my aching heart, not burn the whole house down. I started unraveling. The lies built up like static in my mind. Who did I tell what? Did I delete that text? Was the perfume too strong? Did Michael notice? My chest always felt tight. My sleep was shallow and full of dreams I couldn't explain. One night, I woke up gasping, thinking Michael had found us, that he was standing over the bed with that look again. But it was just a dream. And Michael was gone on another trip. Or maybe just sleeping in the guest room again. I stopped recognizing myself. I'd put on lipstick just to sit in my car. I'd rehearse excuses in the mirror, then forget which ones I'd already used. I avoided Carly. I avoided Michael. I even started avoiding Liam, and that's when he knew. He texted less. Didn't reach for me like he used to. And the day I canceled on him for the third time, he just replied, "Maybe you already made your choice." But the truth is, I hadn't. I was just stuck between two worlds, too afraid to commit to either. And that kind of limbo, it rots you. Slowly, from the inside out. It was dinner. Tuesday night. Michael had made spaghetti. He never cooks, but that night, he tried. Maybe to feel normal. Maybe to give us something to hold on to. The kids were at my mother's. He didn't say why he wanted it that way. But I knew. The table was set. Too neatly. 2 wine glasses. Candles. Napkins folded just so. Like he was trying to remember who we used to be. I sat down across from him. He was quiet. Too quiet. He twirled his fork in the spaghetti like it was taking everything in him just to keep his hands steady. And I could feel the walls closing in. Tighter. Every second. Then, he looked up. His voice barely more than a whisper. "Is there something you want to tell me?" That's all he said. No accusations. No yelling. Just that one line. And it sliced through me like a blade. I froze. Fork halfway to my mouth. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. He knew. Not guessed. Not suspected. Knew. I opened my mouth. I don't even know what I meant to say. But instead, I started crying. Not the kind of crying where you wipe a single tear and keep your dignity. No. This was a full collapse. Chest heaving. Shoulders shaking. Every part of me unraveling in front of the man I had once vowed to never hurt. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Over and over again. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't plan it. Michael didn't move. Not at first. He just looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Someone he couldn't recognize. Then, slowly, he pushed his chair back. The screech of it against the tile floor made me flinch. He stood up, walked around the table. For a second, I thought he might scream, break something, say something cruel. But he didn't. He just looked down at me, eyes shining not with rage, but devastation. And he said, "You could have told me when it still mattered." Then he left, keys in hand. Door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through my entire body. I sat there, alone, in front of a plate of cold spaghetti and 2 glasses of untouched wine. I stared at that chair across from me, hoping somehow if I just waited long enough, it would fill again. But it didn't. My phone buzzed an hour later. Liam. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not that night. Not with Michael's voice still ringing in my ears. "You could have told me when it still mattered." Because that was it. That was the moment. The exact second I knew. I had broken something I could never fix. Not just my marriage. Not just my family. But the way he looked at me. The way he once loved me. And nothing, no apology, no explanation, could ever bring that back. Michael packed a bag that night and left. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just silence. It was somehow worse than a fight. Because with a fight, at least there's still something to fix. With silence, it's just a void. And I was left inside it. The kids didn't know what had happened. Not exactly. But they felt it. Children always do. The way I stopped humming while making their lunch. The way their dad's toothbrush wasn't in the holder anymore. The way bedtime stories got shorter. My daughter asked me one night, "Are you okay, Mommy?" And I smiled. Lied. "Just tired, baby." But inside, I was hollowed out. Liam texted. Called. He asked if I was okay. Said he missed me. Said he'd wait, however long it took. But I couldn't answer. Not yet. Not like that. And a week later, I asked him to meet me. We sat in his truck, parked behind the old gas station where no one would see us. He looked at me like I was still the woman he had fallen for. But I didn't feel like her anymore. I can't keep doing this, I said. His face twisted, confused, hurt. I thought you felt it too, he whispered. I did, I said. But that doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make it real. That was the last time I saw him. He didn't fight me on it. Maybe because part of him knew. Maybe because he was waiting for me to be someone I never fully was. Not really. And I was tired of pretending. With everyone, even myself. The weeks after that, they were the hardest. I didn't just lose Michael. Or Liam. I lost the illusion I'd been clinging to for years. The one where I told myself I was fine. That being needed was the same as being loved. That being safe was enough. I started therapy. Not to fix the marriage. Not to win anyone back. Just to survive myself. I went for walks. Alone. I sat in cafes and didn't hide behind my phone. I pulled out my old sketch pad. Charcoal on paper. Messy, imperfect, real. I drew my hands first. Because they were always doing something for someone else. Cooking, packing, cleaning. And now, they were finally mine. Some nights I cried until I fell asleep. Other nights, I just sat in the quiet. Let it hurt. Let it settle. Because regret is like a shadow, always following, always stretching behind you. But sometimes, in the right light, it stops chasing and starts teaching. I looked in the mirror one morning. No makeup. No smile. Just me. And for the first time in years, I didn't look away. I didn't just lose him. I lost who I was pretending to be. And I had to find who I really am. Not a perfect wife. Not someone's mother. Not someone's secret. Just me. Flawed. Bruised. Becoming. It had been almost a year. Life had settled. In that quiet, uncomfortable way life does after a storm. The marriage didn't survive. Michael moved into an apartment on the other side of town. We talked now about the kids, the schedules, the things that needed attention. Not about the past. Not about the night everything changed. Some days were still heavy. Others less so. Healing doesn't announce itself. It just shows up quietly, one day at a time. I had started reading again. Something I used to love before the world got so loud. That afternoon, the bookstore was quiet. A little local shop with creaky wooden floors and the smell of paper and time. I was in the back, running my fingers along the spines of poetry books I used to quote in college when I felt it. A shift in the air. I don't know how else to describe it, except I just knew. I looked up. And there he was. Liam. Standing near the front table. Wearing a dark gray jacket. Hair a little longer. Still him, but quieter. Like time had sanded his edges too. He hadn't seen me yet. And for a moment, I just watched. There was no rush of adrenaline. No ache in my chest. Just stillness. He turned. His eyes met mine. No smile. No tension. Just a pause, a quiet second suspended between two people who once burned like fire. And in that second, everything came back. The rain, the way his hand had fit against my face, the tremble in my voice when I told him goodbye, the part of me I gave to him that I'll never fully get back. He gave a small nod, almost like a bow, and I returned it. No wave, no walkover. Just a silent understanding between two people who had shared a storm and survived its wreckage on separate shores. He turned and walked toward the checkout. I turned back to the shelves. Didn't follow. Didn't watch him leave. I let him go. Again. But this time without breaking. As I walked out into the late afternoon light, book in hand, wind brushing against my cheek, I felt something close. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending way, but in the soft way doors close when you don't slam them. When you simply choose to leave the room and not look back. Some stories don't end with a kiss. Some end with a quiet understanding and a promise to never forget. Not because we wish to return, but because we finally know who we are and how much it cost us to find out. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Not because they were bad people, but because the timing was wrong. Or because the life you had already built was too fragile to risk. Maybe you tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't real. But sometimes, love doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives. And suddenly, everything you thought you knew about yourself, about loyalty, about happiness, it all gets thrown into question. Would you risk it all? A chance at happiness even if it meant losing everything else? Or would you walk away before the line was crossed? I don't know the answer for you. And honestly, I'm still figuring out the answer for me. But one thing I do know, we're all just human. Fragile. Messy. Searching for connection in a world that often feels so disconnected. So, if my story touched something inside you, something raw or hidden or complicated, I want to hear from you. Comment below, would you have done the same? Or walked away sooner? Let's talk. Let's understand each other. And if you want to hear more stories that don't shy away from the truth, the mistakes, the heartache, subscribe to Cheating Confession Diary. Because here we go where others won't. Where the messy parts of love are not just told, but felt. Thank you for listening. And for not turning away.